Peter, you're looking at the phenomenon of found footage movies, which is barely 15 years old. So do we owe the emergence of this genre simply to a proliferation of cheap and cheerful camcorders at that time, or was there a more complicated creative impulse behind it?
Well, I think there's a much more complicated sort of. I think there's a whole chronology of antecedents that have led to this trend in modern horror. You say it's only 15 years old. Actually, Cannibal Holocaust sort of started it back in the 80s. You could say it's been influenced by things like Orson Welles' War of the Worlds radio broadcast that people believed was real, and 18th century literature where people wrote as if they were writing diaries and tried to convince people it was real. So yeah, I think it is to do with the technology.
It's the final push.
Yes, yeah, it's made a lot of filmmakers be able to get out there and make these type of films, definitely.
What about the mockumentary genre? Did this genre contribute to the found footage aesthetic?
Absolutely. I think mockumentaries, a lot of these films are just mockumentaries. They're just not comedies, which a lot of This Is Spinal Tap and all that thing did. But yeah, they are just fake documentaries or fake home videos, or they're things like that. But I think it's an overall trend in the media of blending fact and fiction. I think that's an important thing about these films.
Now, have you found that the audience of found footage films experience a greater degree of fear and suspense that of horror films with conventional storytelling, like Hitchcock's The Birds or The Shining, for instance?
Yeah, well, I haven't actually been sort of questioning audiences, which is something I'd like to do in the future, but I've been looking at sort of internet blogs and fan sites and things like that, so I've been looking at what people have said about these films, and yeah, they are saying that sort of thing. They identify with the characters more because they're in the position of the characters.
They're discovering it all for themselves as they go along.
Yes, and they're hearing the thoughts of the characters and all these sorts of things. So yes, it's almost like playing a first-person video game, which I think a lot of kids do. So I think this is going to become more common, I think.
Now, one criticism of the found footage films is that they are open-ended, many of them, and they deny the audience the satisfaction of closure, knowing, what happened in the end. So do you agree?
Absolutely, and I think that's a great thing. I think...
Is it?
Yeah, perhaps not mainstream audiences. Perhaps most audiences want closure and they want a happy ending and all that sort of thing.
Not necessarily happy ending, it's just an ending of a sort.
That's true, but I think what's great about... it's for horror fans, really. These films are perfect because... you want to be scared by horror, and you want to think that the threat is still out there. So when you leave the cinema, you're not going, "Oh, phew, they took care of it." You're going, "Oh my God, the threat is still out there, and it could happen."
But isn't this open-endedness often just a cop-out for sloppy script writing and production? Like, TV audiences are getting tired of the series like Lost or Heroes, where you never find out what actually happened. It's terribly frustrating, isn't it?
It can be frustrating, yes.
So you agree?
It can, yeah, it can be frustrating, and I completely understand that. And there's a lot of people that say that, but I think you've got to embrace it. I think it's much better to go home with questions in your mind about what happened than to go home and go, yeah, that's exactly what happened. How dull.
The Guardian gave its damning verdict to found footage movies several months ago, saying that what was once innovative has become a tired cliche. So does the dustbin of history loom for this genre?
I think it's much more than a fad. I think we're seeing this technique being used in films way beyond horror now. We're seeing it in a science fiction film called Chronicle and a cop film called End of Watch. I think because of things like YouTube, where we're just watching people's videos all the time, I think you're going to find this more and more and more. I think it's going to go on and on forever.
That's a frightening prospect. Thank you.
That's all right.